Hello and welcome back to Up the Villa podcast. If you are new, make sure you're smashing that like button, subscribe to the channel and drop your thoughts in the comment section down below. Joined by Justin. How you doing, mate?
Hello. Good.
Good stuff. Right. Dobbin, Iroegbunam, swapped both ways. If you can't beat them, join them. Us and Everton come together for PSR reasons. And it looks like Villa and Chelsea are doing the same. Is it a loophole? Potentially. But, all three clubs have got potential PSR problems going into July. So it makes me think that there is a way around this with player trading. We're starting to see more player trading in football. So I think it's exciting. It's exciting for Villa and Everton, both getting two youngsters who hopefully can flourish at their new clubs. Dobbin, I've seen him a little bit. He started the game at Villa Park when we beat them at the start of the season. He's lively. He's creative. Everton fans speak very, very highly of Dobbin. So it feels like we've got a real good player coming to Villa that can hopefully develop, can grow under Unai Emery and our new sort of system that we've got going on. So I think it's exciting. Justin, how are you feeling about Dobbin coming to Villa?
Yes, if you can't beat them, circumnavigate them. That's what I'm saying. Get around them somehow. Yeah, it's a strange one, isn't it? We've seen a shift in transfer strategy. I put a tweet out earlier, I think, and from January, we definitely went younger, didn't we? With Morgan Rogers and Nedeljkovic and Sousa. And then this window, the start of it, has definitely seen this shift again to trying to get through the PNS and the FFP issues, and also continue this trend of bringing in young players. So I think it's sort of killing two birds with one stone, isn't it? We're bringing in young players for not massive amounts of money, to be honest, who I think Emery would be confident of at the very least improving, and us not losing money on any of them. And if one or two of them turn out to be little stars and come through and play, a bit like Morgan Rogers has proved to be, then all for the best. They must have done their research on these players. They're not just plucking them out of thin air and signing them. So yeah, I think the only frustrating thing is I think Tim Iroegbunam's. We think there's a potential there that he could have gone on and be a good player, and I think probably Everton fans are probably sitting here tonight doing probably a podcast on Dobbin saying the same thing. We felt that there's a potential he could go on and be a good player. Now, who's going to get the best end of this deal? We'll find out in 5 years' time, won't we? If Iroegbunam goes on to be a really good centre midfielder in the Premier League and Dobbin disappears without trace, then it's not a good deal. But only time will tell, won't it?
Yeah, I think it's exciting, and I think you're spot on there with two clubs signing players from each club that are young, that have got big potential. And I think from a Villa perspective, I can understand this one a lot more. I was on an Everton podcast and I was talking about Iroegbunam, and they were sort of saying to me, like, we know nothing about Iroegbunam. We'll talk about Iroegbunam as well, because I imagine we'll have some Everton fans watching as well, so they can get a bit of an insight into Iroegbunam, and I guess I want to know what we've got to say about Dobbin. So we'll talk about the whole thing, really. But they're asking me about Iroegbunam, and asking me what I thought about him, how I expect him to be integrated into the Everton team, what type of player he is. And it was pretty obvious what I said, really, that we didn't really see much of him. We had a midfield injury crisis and we were crying out for midfielders, and he didn't play. He's got big potential. I think we all understand that. We think that if he played a number of games, you could unlock a player there. He's got a lot of potential. We saw that at QPR. He was pretty decent at QPR. And he's been a player that we thought, we could unlock something. But unfortunately, from a Villa point of view, from a Villa fan base point of view, Unai Emery has been the man that with the clipboard that's been able to watch Iroegbunam for a whole season, how he's training, how he feels like he can develop. And he feels like you've got to look at player welfare at the same time, haven't you? He's not going to get any minutes. We was in the Europa Conference League last season. He hardly got any minutes. We're going into the Champions League this season. So he's not going to get many minutes. And then they're asking how I felt like he was going to fit into the Everton team. And I watch Everton a bit. I don't watch them all the time, but I watch enough of them to know what Dyche is all about. And, they've got a player that Villa are sort of apparently after in Onana, who is on the bench and doesn't really get a game. And I was saying to the guys on this Everton podcast that if Onana can't get a game and Dyche can't play Onana and he can't play Dobbin, and we know that Dyche has these sort of like favourites and he likes what he likes what he knows, he likes Dwight McNeil and he likes those types of players. I'm not really sure Iroegbunam's going to get too much game time. What are you thinking on Iroegbunam to Everton, knowing that Dyche is there?
I think that Iroegbunam has got the best end of the deal in terms of career development. I think he's much closer to first team football in the Everton squad than he would be in the Villa squad. And I think ultimately that's all that matters. I think his pathway to the first team is a lot clearer at Everton, and I think he'll get minutes in the Premier League. And with the best will in the world, he just wouldn't get minutes at Villa this season. He wouldn't. That's just being brutally honest. Our pathway now is to the top. We've broke the top four with Champions League side, and we have to have players that are comfortable at that level. And maybe in 3 or 4 years' time, he might get there. Who knows where he'll end up? But currently, he with pressures of financial responsibilities for clubs to adhere to, then they're going to, and we've seen it a lot now with us and Chelsea and Everton, you are going to start to look and say, okay, if we're just shy of FFP each year by 10 or 20 million, then you do start to look at the players that are coming through and you start to question, okay, Team Iroegbunam would have been lovely to keep him around and continue his development and see where he ends up and will he push for a first team place, but ultimately he's not going to play many minutes, and you've got £10 million for him, which is a huge amount of money for an academy player that's come through. I know we nicked him from Albion, but so in respects of clear profit and what we've done since he arrived at the club, it's a good turnaround. If you bring in all these young players and you can end up selling them for 10 to 15 million pounds each, that's a huge amount of money to bring into any football club. And I've said it before on here, I think, that was a huge part of Alex Ferguson's career at Manchester United. He'd bring all these young players through and he'd give them minutes in League Cup games, and once they'd qualified in the Champions League, they'd get a game here and a game there. And because they had that on their CV and they were very young players and they came through the Man United Academy, a team that was winning trophies every season, all of a sudden the value of those players was quite high. And, they could get rid of three. Oh, we signed him from Manchester United. He played in the Champions League last season. So it was a really good way of keeping your turnover ticking over on these players. And I think we're going to see that a lot with Villa now, with all these young players. We saw that young centre-half sign the other day, didn't we, to the reserves? So, yeah, I think it's definitely a game plan, and it's definitely a way that they are trying to keep tabs with this financial problem that every club seems to now be eternally involved in. And until that changes, and I know the owners are trying to push for that now, which I think is good. I'm not a huge fan of money in football. I think it's ridiculous how much money swirls around, wages and transfer fees, and it artificially inflates us as just general, public paying to go and watch the game. So if we could somehow rein that in a bit, I think it would be good for everybody, but it is what it is. We are where we are. So we've got to be a little bit clever in how we do business now. And this is one avenue of doing that.
Yeah. And I think it's important to keep reiterating some of the points that we tend to make on this podcast, that, we've signed a lot of players so far that look like they're going to be playing on the left-hand side for Villa. Right-hand side has not been addressed yet. So that area of the team is still a long way to go. The window's long. We can still sign players in different key areas that we need. But the left-hand side looks like it's been targeted with Maatsen and Dobbin. Where do you feel like Dobbin will rank within the picture after pre-season, if you had to predict where you think he will be going into the start of the season?
What's his age? He's 21, isn't he? I think they'll be taken on the pre-season tour, like a lot of these players will be, and they'll be fully assessed, and then they will decide what they're going to do with them. I think one or two of them will end up in the reserves, and then basically be given a chance to maybe stay in and around the first team training. We may even see one or two of these players be let out on loan. It's no different to an academy player that's come through the ranks for 3 or 4 or 5 years and he's on the cusp. A bit like an Iroegbunam has been recently. We went on the ripple effect the other week, didn't we? And we actually both thought that Iroegbunam could be primed for another loan this season because of the reasons we stated earlier. We don't think he's going to get much game time, but we still felt he had a chance of becoming something. So it makes sense, instead of hanging him around not getting minutes, go and play somewhere. So we might even see one or two of these players like Dobbin maybe having a pre-season with Villa, but then somebody from the Championship might say, okay, we'll take him till January and we'll give him minutes. He did extremely well at Derby when he went on loan there. We might see Najalkovic and Souza as well going back on loan to clubs. We just don't know until the squad settles down towards the end of pre-season. You don't get a real big picture of where these players are going to end up. One or two of them, I would imagine, will have to be retained within the squad because we've got to fulfil quotas, haven't we, for League and Champions League and all that. And we do carry big squads now because of huge benches and 5 substitutions. So, we're going to need a lot of these players. As we saw, unfortunately, last season, injuries can strike at any time. So we don't want to be in that position again where we're scratching around looking for players.
Yeah, there will be one question in the comment section that I'm going to preempt is coming our way. And the question in the comment section is going to be, why does Unai Emery keep selling and not playing all of our youngsters? Justin.
Because he's an experienced coach and he knows what he's looking at. And ultimately, if you're good enough, you play, don't you? That's the truth, isn't it?
That would be that would be the response that I would write in the comment section. That comment keeps reappearing, and
it's not personal. He's not
no.
anti-youth players, is he? I'll give you one example. His name's gone straight out of my head. You know what I'm talking about. Attacking midfielder, young kid. I can't think of his name.
For Villa?
Bought it from Derby. Yeah, bought it from Derby. Kellyman, why is my brain not working? I've had a long day at work. Amari Kellyman, there you go. He's good enough and he's in the squad. And he's 17. There you go. If you're good enough, you play. That's the bottom line. It's not a personal slight on anybody that you get sold. It's just that you are assessed as a footballer every single season, and you unfortunately it's somebody's decision whether you stay or go. I know young Todd Alcock, who's a friend of mine, and he's captain the reserve team this season. I've followed his journey from a kid, literally a kid, 6 years of age, signing for Villa as a 6-year-old. And he's now captain, and he has captained the reserve team this season, and he's sort of on the fringes of the first team. Now, every single season I've spoke to his mum and dad, who I know really well, and I say, how's he getting on? And now, towards the end of every season, they say the same thing to me. He's had a really good season. We have to now wait and see what the club are going to do with him. And they get the answer every year. We're going to keep him for another year. We're going to keep him for another year. And then they progress, 14s, 15s, under 18s, 21s. And every year I've had the same conversation up until the point it was now they decide whether they're going to give him a professional contract. And then he got a professional contract. Then he got another one. So these decisions are made year in, year out with every single player at the club. And because you've got a contract, like a 4 or 5 year deal, in the first team, you still have to make that decision. You won't get released, but you'll be sold, won't you, if you surplus to requirements. So it's not a personal slight on anybody. And I think footballers probably generally tend to know this anyway, and they know that that's the nature of the beast, isn't it?
Yeah, footballers know, don't they? They know the environment that they're in. You know that they don't get to say 21, 22, 20, and start thinking like, oh, this is a weird environment. How these young players have been involved in this football cycle system since sometimes 5, 6, 7, like you're saying, and each season it's like, I don't know whether I'm going to be here. Okay, you get to play for the under 8s. Okay, you're going to play for the under 9s. Okay, you're going to play for the under 10s. And I think the prime example for me with Emery, especially with young talent, is Morgan Rogers.
Yeah,
21 years of age, signed him for Middlesbrough, signed him in January. If you're good enough, you'll start training hard. You'll start working. You start buying into the way I want to work, the way I want to operate. I'll mould you into a specific player. First name on the team sheet before he got injured. It was that crucial for Villa on that left hand side. So 21-year-old, I think I'm exactly like you with these youngsters. I love youth. I love our academy. I love the players. I love going to Bodymore to watch them. But ultimately, you will only play for Aston Villa if you are at the correct level and you are a very, very good footballer. And that is the bottom line. The other thing is what you've got to remember as well. We're talking about Iroegbunam leaving. The best thing for Villa and the best thing for Iroegbunam is to be playing football. And Villa aren't just going to keep a player because we like him. We have a duty of care with some of the youngsters, especially from the academy, to sort of set them up. You see players that are out of contract once they get to a period and they're completely out of contract, they'll stay at Villa, and Villa will help them find a football club to go to. So we're all about welfare, and we're always about looking after these players. So I think the other aspect of it as well is you've got to look at where Aston Villa are at times and what we're trying to achieve and where we're trying to get to. Like, was it the right time to put, say, someone like Amari Kellyman in a Villa side that was depleted with injuries, that were running out of steam at the end of the season? Was it the right time to play someone like Kellyman at the end of the season? And the answer is no, because there was so much pressure on us to get Champions League, and that's totally not the right environment for someone like, for me, Kellyman to be playing their football. So the environment's got to be right, and it's just got to be well suited overall to Aston Villa. So do you want to add anything on that sort of youngster
No, we saw it last year, didn't we? Archer and Philogene Bidace. We all actually predicted a massive season last year for Bidace because he had a brilliant pre-season. He went to America, didn't he? He played really well. We thought, you know what, he's pushing for a first team here, and it was a little bit of a surprise when they sold him. But they inserted these clauses in, and they said, right, okay, that helps financial fair play as well. And ultimately, Archer had got game time at Villa, Bidace less so. But we felt both of them could maybe make it at Villa, but again, they were deemed surplus to requirements, and they were shipped out on permanent deals, or semi-permanent if you class the buybacks, in that way. I'm okay with it, honestly. I think if we see, let's go back to one of the best players I've ever seen in a Villa shirt, Jack Grealish. He came through the academy. He was easily good enough for the first team, and he played. Jacob Ramsey came through the academy. There's an interesting case study. Jacob Ramsey and his brother, Aaron. Jacob was really good, and by all accounts, at the time when he broke through, a lot of people were saying, if you think he's good, his brother's even better. Yet it didn't work out for Aaron, did it? He couldn't make that step up to the first team, and he was another one that went out unlucky, getting the injury the way he did. Still could make it, still could have a big future. It's not an exact science. I think that's the way you got to look at it. And there's been plenty of occasions when managers have deemed somebody not good enough and they've gone somewhere else and been absolutely brilliant. So you have to back your judgment. You have to back your manager's judgment. That's what you pay him the big money for, and that's why we've got one of the best in the business. And that's what I'm currently doing. I hope he's here for another 20 years, Luke, because I'm already having problems coping, thinking that one day he won't be there. So, yeah, I'm okay with it. I understand it, and I think if you understand it and you understand all the different aspects that make up a transfer deal, especially in this really complicated era that we're currently living in, then I'm fine with it.
Yeah, I think what's happening, especially at Villa, is it's slightly new territory. The way we're operating, and I think the way we're operating is obviously different to the way we've sort of been operating before. And when I say the way we're operating, if ever I go back to certain, before Emery, should we say, I think that before Emery, that's the way I feel like we've operated for a number of years. We've signed players. Sometimes it's felt really, as a fan, I've not seen the plan behind it. I've not seen the structure behind it. I've not seen the policy behind it. It's felt very living for that next transfer window. I've always said this on this podcast. We've always lived for a transfer window to better ourselves, and I
Love
think
a
that's
transfer
something.
hub.
Yeah, I think that's something that I think we've always done. So now with Emery, it's like we're starting to see a sort of what's the word? Quality control, I think is the word I'm going to say.
Yeah.
We've got quality control, and what happens? We're in the Bodymore Heath factory, and that is where we're situated. And within the quality control, we've got players that are going through the building at Bodymore, and Unai is looking at all these different aspects of players, youngsters, and he's fine tuning who's good enough and who's not good enough. He's taking out the ones that aren't. We're moving them along. We're working with our different pieces, and we're building this Unai Emery empire of what we're going to become in 3 or 4 years' time. Now, with Monchi's role, unlike what we've seen before, it's not just about signing first team players that come into the first 11. A striker comes in, it's generally replacing the striker that is already there. That's how Villa have always operated. We've always gone central midfielder, you'll be playing next season. Next one, you might be on the bench. You might not be good enough. You'll be moved on. But now we've got a bigger picture where there's loads of different aspects coming in. We've got youngsters that are up and coming. They're going to be pushing. They're going to be fighting. We've got first teamers coming in. And the whole thing is just this well-oiled machine. Players are going to go. Players are going to come. There's going to be experienced players coming in. Players for big money coming in. There's going to be youngsters coming in. There's going to be loan players coming in. And we're far from this finished article. So to assess what we're doing and to sort of say, I feel like that's a bad thing or that's a bad thing, and why are we doing this and why are we doing that? We're doing it all for the bigger picture. And for me, it's for the good of Villa and for the good of Emery. And it's what we are. It's what we're about to become and not what we are. I think that's really important. And I think, yes, it's new. Yes, it's fresh. Yes, it's a bit confusing to understand why we're doing certain things. But I think we're going in a real new direction, just like the first team have, on an upward trajectory. Off the field with transfers, we're going in a new, fresh direction as well.
I think what I want to see is, obviously, I want long term now. We haven't seen a long term Villa manager for a very long time, like 5, 6, 7 seasons. That's what I want. That's what I desperately want to see at Villa. So I want to see a dynasty built at Aston Villa now. I want to see a Man United era, an Arsenal era, a Chelsea era, and now the Man City era. I'm not saying we're going to go on and win multiple league titles. I mean, I hope we do, but that's a little bit off yet. It's possible in the way we're going. Who knows? But I want to see this long, like you're saying, long-term vision. I want to see 2 good players in every position. I want to see a really good young player in the under-21s in that position. I want to see a really good player in the 18s in that position. So there's this constant flow of players ready to step in. So if you do get an injury crisis in the first team, you've not just got two in the first team that can back up, but your first choice is gone, your second choice is playing, your under-21 player steps onto the bench. He knows exactly the style, exactly the formation, exactly what's expected of him. And the 18 then steps up behind him. Generally that's the way the keepers run. But I want to see that flow through all the systems, and I think this is why you're seeing this switch to a youth policy alongside first team policy. And I said this again the other day. I see early transfer window is sorting FFP / getting some youth in. Later transfer window, when that's done, by all accounts, FFP will be fine after the Louise deal. So everything we do after that, so if Durrani's a 40, 50 million pound sale, that then opens up a huge, hopefully, financial ability for us to go out and buy those 2 or 3 or 4 game-changing players, that can step straight into the first team. So it's not a one-size-fits-all strategy. It's a very overview look of the whole football club, which will only benefit us.
Yeah, I think that's really important what you've said as well about sort of, especially the youngsters. I don't know what we're going to do with Sousa, the left back that we signed. I don't know what we're going to do with Nedeljkovic. In my head, I feel like Nedeljkovic is probably further ahead than Sousa. Nedeljkovic has played in the Champions League, so I would imagine that he's going to have a real big pre-season to impress. I think we heard his interview, we know what he's all about. But that is also, if you look at that situation there, and say for example, we've got Maatsen on the left, right? So we've got Maatsen, and then we've got the young lad Sousa. Now both of those will be pushing for that left back position, and because Sousa is really young, he's been able to adapt to Emery's methods and principles and the way of working, that if Maatsen comes out the team, Sousa just goes straight in there and he's absolutely fine. Whereas what I would say about what happened last season, and use this as a perfect example, the minute Boubacar Kamara's out, there is no replacement for Boubacar Kamara. You then have to juggle around. You have to take McGinn out his best position. You have to put him further. You then have to move Tielemans. You have to put him further. Douglas Luiz hasn't got his key partner who he works really well with. So because we haven't got the right balance in the squad, it's meant the squad then, from one injury, becomes so unbalanced because you're having to move 3 or 4 players around. That's not good. So hopefully, once we've got all of these little pieces in place, we'll be in a far better position that when those injuries hit or certain things happen, we're just in a far better place. And I think that's where I'm at. That's where I feel like I can see us going in the future.
Yeah, I agree. And, and it is a constantly evolving world, isn't it, football? The rules constantly change. Where you qualify. I mean, who knows what'll happen next year? We might not qualify for Europe at all. We might qualify back for the Europa League or the Conference League again, or we might have a second season in the Champions League. Hopefully that, we can do that again. So all these things, that all affect all of the decision making. I'm reading quite a lot now as like the Maatsen deal. I read it today. He's come to Villa because he wants to play Champions League football, and that's why qualification for that competition is huge. Yeah. Because all of a sudden you become a destination. You become a destination for players to come. So if you can break in there, and then you can stay in there, which is the hardest thing to do. Doing something once is hard, but doing it again when everybody's expecting you to do it the next time, that's even harder. So, but buying these players, making that breakthrough into the top 4, gives us the best chance, if we recruit well, of doing it again. And it is going to be another, it's going to be a much bigger window and summer than I really envisaged at the start. I think there's going to be a bigger turnover of players than I thought would happen. So that in itself brings issues with settling everybody in and getting everybody going again. So and that where what feeds into that then is how good a setup we've got and how people can quickly get up to speed with what we do, and the longer he stays and the longer the club evolves into what he wants at Emery, the easier it is for these players to come in and acclimatise quickly.
Yeah, and for anyone that's worried about a lot of players joining Villa, I'm going to link in a video that I did at the start of the window. It was about Monchi and how Monchi operates, and it's about how Monchi looks after players when they first sign for the football club. And it's all about how they settle in, the liaison people that help them settle in the area, help them settle out in the team as well. But not only that, it's about the players that have been picked to come into Villa on how he's scouted those players. Now, just to roughly go over it before we go, how he does it is he looks at their home performances, he looks at their away performances, and he builds this big, massive profile on each player on how they're going to adapt. And he talks about different players, how they adapt. Some players adapt really quickly, get off the ground fine. Some players just takes that little bit more time. So I'll link that one on the end of this one, and it's worth watching if you want to find out a little bit more information on Monchi and what he does. Most of you have probably watched it, but if you want to have a refresher, then I'll stick it on the end of this. So yeah, we've started with Dobbin and Iroegbunam. Then we've gone on to the transfer policy, how youngsters fit in. I think I'll tell you what, you've had your money's worth today. 31 minutes. So I think this will be a good episode. I think a lot of you
told
will
me he was going to jump on for 10 minutes. He said, just jump on with me for 10 minutes. We'll have a quick chat and then you can go. Like we always do. We get carried away. Yeah,
well, we are going to go. So cheers, everyone, for watching. Up the Dobbin. Hope Iroegbunam does well.
Yeah, I agree with that, Luke. That's a good point. I wish him all the best.
Yeah, I do. I wish them all the best, really. I'll always, whenever someone leaves of someone that I like, I'll always look out for them and look how they're doing as well. So, yeah, up the Villa.
Up the Villa.